All right, about to start our live podcast. Hopefully, here in Alibag, nothing will go wrong. But I just want to quickly, before I invite my lovely guests, I want to quickly mention thank you once again to the Maharashtra government. Another great moment of philosophy and care. They've come up with grocery shops should be shut from 7, open only 7 to 11 a.m. because that is one way the pandemic will definitely just disappear, right? Give us 4 hours less of grocery shopping. And I think that's the answer. Please, governments of the world, listen to me. I'm the only person following this pandemic correctly. That's over. Don't look back at all the negatives about locking people up and shutting things down. The only way out is ahead in terms of medical assistance. That remdesivir should be available. The vaccine should be promoted on a war footing with mobile clinics coming and jumping into people as fast as possible. Immunity should be pushed. People should be given the right vitamins and things and be ready to fight the disease in a positive fashion rather than hide and shut groceries down. By not opening a grocery shop for 2 or 3 hours, nothing is going to change. But then what do we know about governance? And then what do anybody else know about governance is the question of the day. But there's somebody who knows about old world governance, and some great heroes are more likely heroines, but heroes as well. I don't think she's sexist, but she does promote more of the female variety, and rightly so, because history has always been a little skewed to one side, which I'm sure we'll discuss. So with great pleasure, let me introduce Ira, not Ira. I stand corrected seven
That's
times. And
right.
she spent a whole life telling idiots like me to, it's a simple three-letter name. It's like Jai. You can't pronounce Jai wrong. It's really easy. So it's Ira. Everybody get that right. And Mukuti. And let me get that right as well. It's not Mukti, as in the Punjabi without the O, or is it?
That's right. It's Mukhoti. It's actually somewhere a version of Mukhopadhyay. Some ancestor must have not liked
Oh,
Mukhopadhyay and changed
you
it to.
refuse to be anglicized, so you went some other way with it.
We went some strange way, and it's Ira Mukhoti. There you go.
Nice. A big believer in names being more than respected, understood. Because I
Understood.
think I think
Correct.
you the basic sensitivity to the other person is gone if you just what's the name or whatever it is. Immediately it's on a wrong footing, wouldn't you
I
say?
agree because
So
names convey so much meaning, and we often choose them with care. So we should understand and say them properly.
it just doesn't take that long to I mean, your name is really easy, but talking about the 6 7 syllable names as well doesn't take that long. But don't worry, Ira, don't panic. This show is not about name and nomenclature. It's more about let's talk about the pandemic for a minute since I started that, and then
Mhm.
we'll of course get right into your work and your brand new book, Second in This Terrible Pandemic. How's it like in Gurugram? You mentioned one of the oldest cities of India,
Yes.
which I believe hasn't remained like that for the last few hundred years. Uh,
Well, it's a sort of schizophrenic city because it is an ancient city, as you say, with, it's lost in myths, its origins are lost in myths, but it's also a brand new suburb with lots of high rises. I think one of the highest per capita incomes in India, lots of young professional couples. So it's this place that is still searching for an identity, I think, but is slowly coming into its own in its own way. So that's how it's doing.
we missed out on an opportunity. Early 2000s, we were told by lots of people. I would work with MTV and we would shoot in Gurugram and Noida outside Delhi for
Okay.
whatever reasons. And many people told us, the local guys told us, invest in Gurugram.
Oh,
This is
yes.
and it was dirt cheap. And we
Yes.
didn't. And then it
Yes.
escalated so quickly in front of my eyes. Like the next time I came there, it
Correct.
was up 20%, then 40%. And suddenly uh,
Yes.
1 lakh property was worth like a crore. I was like, wow.
Correct. It's absolutely mad. And the market spaces here as well, apparently incredibly expensive, comparing with Khan Market and any other place in India. So yes, it's a crazy, crazy
The,
suburb in a
did
way.
the Mukotis become multimillionaires, or is that far too personal a question?
The Mukhotis were always like true Bengalis, Bhadra log were terrible business people and always made the wrong decisions.
you
this was
sold.
this
You
was just
sold in the early
serendipity.
times.
Yes, we sold.
All right. Okay. But your claim to fame is not buying and selling of real estate for sure. It is, on the other hand, one of our renowned scholars. So let's start. We want to go back into your entire life as quickly as we can because we
Oh
have only a
dear.
40-minute episode.
Yes.
But let's start at the top, which is the release
Mhm.
of the latest book in the pandemic this month, which
Yes.
is on Draupadi. Or
Yes,
is that just
it's actually on the women of the Mahabharat. And just a quick clarification, because the situation is so volatile and changing all the time. So the book, A Song for Draupadi, is actually released. It's slated now to release in June. We took a decision
ooh,
because things are so bad right now in Delhi and of course in Mumbai as well. So we're delaying it by a month, and then we will also take a call to see whether it should be pushed back further because it's just not
so we
ideal
have
conditions.
so Ira, we have two options. We keep on talking till June. Uh, to a 2 month podcast, or we come back and resell it. No, but
Yes.
is there like a soft launch? Is it already out or not?
No,
Because I've been
it is not out as yet. I don't know if you've been given a copy, but
we
it's
have
not.
been sent a copy,
I
but I will.
haven't got a physical copy
They
as
never send
yet.
the author because you might correct the copy again and drive them bonkers.
So they've
Yeah,
held
but
back. Yeah.
so shall we discuss it or shall we wait till
Oh,
June?
no, of course we can, so that people have an idea of what's coming. June is not far away after all. So
Okay.
it was supposed to be in 2 weeks' time, so now it's in 6 weeks' time.
Fair enough. So what we'll do is we'll just go over it a little bit and then we'll go
Okay.
back, because I'd
Sure.
love to know your interesting journey,
Mhm.
and which is really what the podcast is all about. But Songs of Draupadi. So you were saying, let's be clear about all the women of the Mahabharata, or many
It
of the
is.
women of the
It is.
Mahabharata who perhaps don't get the
That's
beacons
right.
shown on them enough.
That's right. The Mahabharata is such a wonderful, complex text, and we have so many incredible women mentioned in it, from Ganga to Satyavati, Kunti, endless number of wonderful women, and Draupadi very much the anchor of the story. But because the Mahabharata has been written over eons, over centuries, maybe 1,000 years, scholars are now saying that's how long it took to form the actual Mahabharata that we now talk about. So a lot of layering happened, reinterpretation happened, myth-making happened, and a lot of, let us say, Brahminical revisions happened to the stories and the voices of the women. So what was interesting for me was to find the original stories. Of course, it's always impossible in an epic like the Mahabharata, but to come as close as possible to the voices of these women as they were first imagined or recorded. And those voices are actually extremely different from the way that they're portrayed today. For example, Draupadi, this extremely fierce, angry woman who spent a huge part of her life in an undomesticated state, wearing clothes made of bark and leaves and things in the forest with her husband, and leaving her hair ungroomed, which is such a powerful symbol for women in India to not have
She's a
groomed
warrior.
hair. I think she would have loved to have been a warrior. The amount she tries to encourage her husbands to take up the sword and fight the Kauravas, but she's the sort of the voice of justice. Let us say she's the one who keeps claiming justice on her own behalf as well, because she's been humiliated in that sabha in front of all these men. So even when her husbands are of a mind to kind of take the peaceful road and live in a small village and not ask for what is theirs by right, she's the one behind them, the force driving them, and think, remember your birthright, remember what you were born to do, remember what was done to me as a woman, as a princess, as a queen, and you must fight for me because I can't. So this voice of hers is very powerful.
So what is the pre-story then, just before the Pandavas? Before that, the more known story.
Well, the Mahabharata is basically the most violent property dispute ever. It is really about who has the right to Hastinapur, who has the right to the throne between two families, like two cousins. So it is typical property dispute in India, which goes on for years and all that. Yes, insults are sent back and forth, and then finally you come to war over it. So that is what it is. It is two families, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. But what drives them behind all of this is what gives you legitimacy, what gives you the right to say that this belongs to me, and what gives you the right is being the son of somebody, who is your mother, what is your lineage. And that is where the women come into this question of legitimacy of women, of the children that they give birth to, and how much they can change and shape the destiny of these people.
Yeah, but so is it possible to look at it from the Kaurav's perspective also?
Of course.
Because the way we are brought up, it's just the one, good and bad.
That's
it's
right.
Just black and white all the time.
Correct.
And also her role, at least for me, is not that big. Whatever little knowledge I have of the Mahabharata or the rapid text that we were given in school and stuff, it's not that big a role. It's there.
Do you mean
but
Draupadi?
Draupadi, yes.
Yeah. No, Draupadi is crucial. We are not told that, but she is absolutely crucial. Firstly, because the great insult is done to her. She's said to be the cause of this great war, which will bring to an end the Yuga, and bring in the Kali Yuga. She brings to an end an entire era, an entire Yuga. So she is very important. And had she not been there, had Kunti not been there also, her mother-in-law, to keep this band of boys, the Pandavas together and focused in their mission, I think they would not have gone to war. They would have stayed in the forest. They were quite happy. They were actually perhaps, the eco warriors of their time. They were pretty happy with the way things were. They didn't always see things so clearly. And Draupadi is absolutely crucial in this forging together of these men, of their will, and bringing them to a place where they're willing to fight for what is theirs.
Okay, you mentioned, I think, Brahmanical prejudice, or maybe that's the wrong word, but so how do we know what is the authentic? Is there a way when it comes to myths?
Yeah.
Is there a way of authenticating? I mean, in history, you have some sort of, you have 24 references from,
Yes.
and you do a sort of average. But what will
Yeah.
you do with yeah?
So,
What will you do with a?
luckily for me, scholars have thought about this a while ago. So, like in the 1970s, clearly it was understood that this enormous, unwieldy mass of information was written over centuries and different voices added to it. So, in the 1970s, a group of scholars banded together to try and gather the very earliest possible texts. So, they looked at the language, the kind of language that is used to find the oldest versions, the stories, the ones which seem like later
What would be the
interpolations.
oldest language used? Like Prakriti or one of those?
That's right, because these were all spoken languages. So the scholars in the 70s brought out an edition which is called the critical edition. It was done in Pune. It's sometimes called the Pune edition or the critical edition. And this is believed to be, for better or for worse, there are other scholars who disagree, but which can be taken as some of the original text, the original story that existed before all the, you will all remember that there are lots of episodes where very long divergence happens on the good and bad, on your dharma, on what it should be like. So there's a lot of, now we must remember that these voices were recorded by men. Even the women's stories were told by men. This was all written by men. So there's a sort of female ventriloquism happening where the women's voices are somehow still coming through. But you see a lot of later recorders saying, okay, so she said this very feisty thing to her husband, challenging him, calling him not Maryada, but we will then put in a lecture about how a good woman should behave. She should not do this. So whenever, you hear a voice saying you should not be doing this, what you know is that this has been happening. So, the scholars have used this sort of reasoning to figure out what were perhaps some of the original messages told to us and the original voices of these women.
Would they have been, again, we are assuming here, but since your assumption will be more educated than anybody else's, would there be some sort of gender parity actually in those days? Would it have been a advanced society in that sense, or would it not have been?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was advanced in the sense that today we would expect it to be, that women being on par with the men in terms of, access to whether they had, really a voice in all sorts of decisions. For example, the women were not supposed to learn the Vedas. And yet we see that Draupadi often quotes the Vedas. So how does this happen? This is something of interest to me. So what happens is that she overhears conversations. So she will say, it is recorded in the text, that Draupadi said, when such and such Brahman came, when such and such sadhu came, I was listening. So the women are there, they're in the background, they're invisible to the men who do not take into account their presence. For example, Gandhari, because she has a blindfold, we think she is deaf, but she is listening very carefully when her husband gets the advice of Brahmins and sadhus. So she knows what is happening. Similarly, Draupadi has access to the Vedas, even though we are told women should not be reading the Vedas. So there is no parity in the sense that today we would talk about parity, especially where elite women, noble women are concerned. There is less that they are allowed to do. And there's, again, even back then, a lot of restrictions on the way a good Hindu woman was expected to behave. But nonetheless, these women are able to overhear things. They're able to they're able to influence decision-making in a lot of ways. And that is what is of interest to me.
But yet some male figure down the ages actually portrayed the female characters in the Mahabharata in a positive light.
Yes.
Some of them have.
That's right. Some of them have. And it is undoubtedly true that some women were, I think in all ages, we've had women who fought against the system. I'm often told, oh, but feminism is a European construct, it's a Western construct. That's just not true. Indian women have fought against the system, have fought against patriarchy throughout the centuries, and those voices sometimes get recorded, sometimes they get lost. In what I've done in my earlier work in Heroines, for example, mostly they are lost and you have to work really hard to get back those voices. There's a sort of male denial of women's achievement, but women's achievements happen. They happen throughout the century. There was Gargi, women who know a lot, knowledgeable women who somehow evade these strictures. And oftentimes these strictures then come into place because those things have happened. Women have gained all this knowledge, or women have, for example, laughed at inappropriate times. So we are told Draupadi never laughed inappropriately. I find that very funny, the specific thing of laughter, whereas we know that she laughed at Karan and that brought about a lot of tensions, right? So whenever you see a stricture for women or for anybody, you know that actually that thing has been happening. Women have been doing those things that the Brahmins are telling us must never be done in an Indian woman.
Yeah, even my namesake, Cyrus the Great, lots of his end is always controversial. Okay. And many feel that a Bactrian princess killed him in battle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sword.
Yeah.
But there are many, but most of the others will not accept that he was killed in battle against some Bactrian tribals. But the others will prefer to give a male twist to it.
That's right.
A man has
That's
killed
right.
a man, a great king
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't make him less great if he was killed by the Bactrian princess,
I
whose
agree.
name escapes me
Agree. And
now.
you know, this
And
happens everywhere.
it possibly happened.
It possibly happened, and this denial happens. It's not just Indian culture at all, it's everywhere. Now, we've recently heard about this Viking warrior who was a woman, and for
Yeah.
all these years we've been told that Viking warriors were men.
Only
The
men.
women never went into battle. Now we find that this wonderful skeleton buried with all battle honors and all the battle axes was a woman, and it took, I think, a woman archaeologist looking at these remains to see that. So this male denial is a global phenomenon. It's not an Indian thing. So we have to just consciously push back against that and keep challenging it.
I don't want to give myself self-importance, but I think when you're a father of a daughter,
Uh-huh.
you realize that if you are a powerful figure sometime,
Yes.
and you're very close to that daughter,
Yeah.
there is no way that she will not be given as much, if not more love than the son.
Correct.
And if you look at that, then in
Yes.
any culture, there must have been some king
Kings,
whose
yes.
daughter was basically him.
Yes.
And when he
Correct.
died, she became him, and
Yeah.
everybody accepted that. It's just,
Yeah.
I can't believe there wouldn't have been many examples of that before.
There
father's
is,
love is
yes.
completely obsessive towards his daughter.
For example, Razia Sultan, apparently her father Iltutmish, even though she had many brothers, Iltutmish realized that his daughter Razia Sultan was the best person to lead, the empire at that time. So he, it is said, nominated his daughter over his sons, which is quite an extraordinary thing to do. So as you say, I think personal experience makes us do different things and do things differently.
And and they may have got it right. People just presume that it's wrong, but maybe Razia was, in terms of quality of personality, leadership, loyalty, ferocity, strategy, and all this, she was superior to those. Why should it just be one way?
That's
Makes no
right.
sense.
That's
Makes
right.
no sense at all. And the other hand, also that the daughter would be, idolizing the father and may derive a lot of those qualities.
Yes.
So I think what you're doing is opening a very important point.
Thank you.
When we look back in history, not just in our own culture but across the world, there'll be examples of women who have not been, because the men who followed making the stories or writing the poems have decided quietly to just push that verse aside, go back to the way it is, because women can't be warriors. Trust me, I'm married. I've been beaten every day. The women are very much
Happy to hear that.
We have very little time. I want to talk about so many more things. Can we just go to the lesser known, for people like me who have just a working knowledge of the Mahabharata, who are the lesser known female warriors that you've shown your light on a little bit, who you feel should have got more publicity?
I talk a lot about Kunti, though of course we know a lot about her, but we know about her. Another thing that is forgotten is that we often reinterpret the way women are presented to us today, for example, in the 20th, 21st century. So the versions we have of these women, even if they're still around, are highly deified, are highly whitewashed and, sanitized, homogenized to such an extent that they all are, almost identical. Like, for example, I used to do this slide when I was in the old days when we could have a physical presentation, where I used to talk about all the women in Heroines, my first book, the 8 of them. And if you look at them in popular culture today, the pictures, they all look like sisters from a Saas Bahu serial. They look the same, whether they lived 2,500 years ago or a few hundred years ago. So we have this tendency, or rather, the popular culture and various factors have this tendency to whitewash, present women in a certain way. So even if I have talked about people who are known, like Satyavati, Gandhari, Kunti, we do know their names, but we don't know the intricacies and the nuances of their struggles. And, that is really, I hope, something that I have tried to do in my new book.
And also probably look at them from a more holistic perspective.
That's right.
I think because we would learn perhaps 2 qualities or lines about each one, like cruel and, treacherous.
That's right.
Exactly.
And
that sticks in your head and you don't see the whole picture.
You don't see the whole picture. You don't see them as real, as people with flaws, as well as virtues and their struggles that they have. What do they overcome to become the people that we remember? Or are they really the sort of people that we remember? Is there more depth to their character?
And the political intrigue would be with everybody. It wouldn't escape anyone. So I think
that's right.
This good and bad painting is a very tough choice to make.
This binary is absolutely, makes no sense. When you start looking at history, you realize that binaries, even though, the current thinking is very fond of binaries in terms of religion and such like, it really did not exist like this. We are a complicated country with many
I think
textures.
Just to simplify in your own mind, you want to have black and white.
Yeah,
otherwise,
I guess so.
Because aren't we also like that? I mean, aren't we all shades of grey?
True, exactly.
Perhaps some of our leaders are closer to black than grey, but why go there? Okay,
why go there?
Yeah, want to now go back into your life, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Love to know how you became this historian, dramatist. Where did it all start? And then we'll quickly look at a couple of the other books if we can.
Yeah, well, I'm a totally accidental writer, which is what I've always said. When I was growing up and I was a decent student, and at that time, our generation, if you were a capable student, you were encouraged to go into the sciences. Now, I was terrible at maths, so that was not an option, but science I could manage. So I was told, science is good for you, even though I loved literature and I wanted to do something in literature, but I was told, no, if you're a good student, you go into the sciences. So I did 5 years of sciences post-grad and did a bit of science in life, and then just realized that it really wasn't for me. And so then, a lot of things happened on the personal level. And it's much later, when I had 2 daughters and they were growing up, and I was looking around, casting around for stories for them to tell them about Indian culture, something that they could relate to, how all us obsessive parents are like now. And we want to control every aspect of their thinking and their life. And so I was looking around for Indian women's story to tell them. And I found what I was telling you earlier, that there are very few inspirational women who are not this cardboard cutout character, this homogenized sort of person, which is deified to the extent that they are not relatable for young girls today in the country. So that started off my search, and I was lucky enough to find a publisher who was interested in the idea, and I came back to my first love, writing. So that's really how it happened.
So it goes back to the daughters, the personal touch. There you go. See, exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same.
Without
I had
knowing,
2 daughters. Yeah.
You were pushed. Because the sincerity of your effort is just there because of their presence, which perhaps would not have been there without their presence.
No, that's right. Because what you are willing to accept as a person. Like I've lived in Delhi almost all my life. I have accepted I must behave a certain way. I must dress a certain way. If I'm going to go out in crowded places in Delhi, I will wear certain clothes, not others. I will do certain things. So I've internalized that to a certain extent, internalized misogyny. But for my daughters, when they were born, I was like, hang on a minute. This I will not accept for my daughters. We always want a better world for our children, don't we? So it was at that stage.
You internalized misogyny? You just threw that out? Okay, all right. I'm not going to fight for the men. I hate them myself. Yeah. Okay. So sorry.
It was more my own thinking that I thought, why should I accept all this? Why can't I contribute in my own way to getting these examples out there for young women today? Why not? Why should our women today accept what, we accepted in the past?
It's that same personal example of where the elite clubs of ours across the 4-5 big cities allowed women memberships. Why? When the father realized his daughter needs the membership, till then he was voting against. It's a personal thing.
It's a personal
my daughter about 5-6 years ago scared the hell out of me. We were very close, but she said, "But Dad, why don't you listen to any female singers?" And I was like, "What?" And then I was thinking, without knowing it, I'm a sexist jerk myself, because I couldn't. I had like Connie. I like music of the 50s and 60s and that kind of era. But struggling with the Connie Francis here and a Lynn Anderson there, and I'm not able to. And against that, my knowledge of Western music of the 50s, 60s, and 70s is like 97% men. And I'm a treasure chest. I know a lot, but it's so skewed.
Yeah.
So then I started listening to the Ronettes and the Crystals and enjoying them as well. But we don't know how we grow up in that genre that you like with one perspective.
Exactly. That happens to, there's even a thing called the Matilda effect, for example, in the sciences. So in the 19th century, a woman coined this term to show that even if a woman made a scientific experiment or she came out with a wonderful scientific, result, that experiment would be co-opted by her male colleague, and it would be printed in his name. So it was actually called the Matilda Gage effect, because this happens till today. You will so many cases. So we are told somewhere in the back of our minds, women aren't scientists, they aren't great painters.
Are you telling me there'll be great pieces of science which are completely female driven and we'll never know?
Exactly.
Over the years.
We will never know them because some of it is.
This podcast will redress that balance. Ira and me will hold hands. No, we can't hold hands. There's social distancing. But we will do what we can to come together as a collective and fight.
There you go.
So, I don't know if it's irony or what, but one has to experience a daughter or a female presence in your life that you value more than yourself. And when that happens, I think the man finally sees the light.
And I'm sure you will agree that it in no way demeans you as a man to accept that. In no way does it make you less of a man, less anything.
It gives you more panoramic view, actually. I started watching women's cricket, for example. You know,
Right.
and she didn't say it like you're a sexist idiot. She made a very, when your observation is made like that, it is
Yes.
so spot on
Yes.
without any prejudice that it just
That's
slaps
right.
you in the face.
Correct. Correct.
It was like a, cathartic moment. I was like,
Yeah.
I actually started feeling bad about myself because I always thought myself as left liberal.
Yes.
I have strong female figures, my mom, my wife, daughter,
Yes.
and like, I said, what the hell happened? I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those
Yes.
good cowboys, one of those terrible, terrible men.
Oh no.
I can't even do the accent, yaar.
Oh
It's not
wow.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
Okay,
impresses
that
you.
shook me.
Yeah, so this is great. I think it is great. I think that the balance is so much in favor of males in terms of
Yes.
history, and this
Yes.
is a small effort then one by
That's
one
right.
slowly to,
Yeah.
because I think as we grow older we have to challenge myths and stories.
I think
Everything can't be
so.
the way we.
I
Yeah,
think so, yeah. And even in history, like in Daughters of the Sun, what I've witnessed, so many people have told me that we had no idea what you were saying about, Mughal women, and nor had I before I started researching all this. And it's important because then you set the bar that much higher for women. If you're telling them women have never done this, that, and the other, then your bar is jolly low as a young woman. You're like, okay, then I can't aspire to be this, that, or the other. But when you see women all around you in the past, in the present, achieving all sorts of things, and nothing is impossible. This is why it's important to have those examples out there.
yeah, it's the passive sexism which scares me. People like myself and others who would not know that they
That's
are
right.
sexist and would rather not be and would be appalled to know they're sexist,
Yes,
if you know what I
yes,
mean.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
you start looking inwardly for the first time in your life and realize your entire upbringing is not as liberal as you think. Your lovely
That's
father
right.
played
That's
a more
right.
stronger role, perhaps, was more
Yeah,
dominant in certain
yeah,
thinking and all for
yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah.
Um okay, let's quickly talk about Akbar because we have to go into a break, and I'm a
Yeah.
big Akbar fan. Can you clean up some of the myths for us, or not myths, the arguments, like whatever I've read about him from very different sources? Second half of his career, huge change in the personality, became a humanitarian, was looking at all kinds of religions, trying to find truth in
Yes.
different things,
Mhm.
became an animal lover, became a vegetarian.
Yeah.
Is this all true?
Yes, this is actually what you are saying is that I'm often confronted with myths which are not true, like the Akbar Birbal, the Jodha Akbar. All these stories are not true, not in this sense.
Birbal was there, but
No, no, of course he was there. But the
but
stories which make up the Akbar
it's
Birbal stories,
romanticized.
yes, are exaggerated because when you actually understand the man that he would never have put up with this sort of making
Who would
fun
have the
of him.
guts to
He had
guts to
yes,
chat? Yeah.
nobody would have had that sort
But
of
he liked
disrespect.
discourse. He had that
He
whole
loved
Diwani.
discourse, and he had very little patience for those who did not know how to discourse, but who could not present their philosophical arguments well. For example, that's how he first turned against the ulema, his own Sunni ulema, saying you guys are actually hurling insults at each other instead of making philosophical points. What is the point of you? Why are you here as theologians if you can only insult each other's religious figures? This is ridiculous. They used to call each other most terrible names. So yes, but what you are saying, what you are talking about is is a sort of unfolding of his personality, which was what I was interested in showing in Akbar, not presenting him as this perfect semi-divine king, which is what Abu al-Fazl does for us. I want to show how, from his background, from his ancestors, from his growing up in Kabul, from his marrying Hindu women, how this character evolves, what were the processes that brought about this shaping, how he shaped Hindustan, what did he do that brought about such huge changes in our country. So I wanted to bring these points in one by one and not present him as Akbar the Great only. He was in many ways
And
a flawed human.
for those, and there are quite a few now who want to wipe Akbar out of the history books and say that period is like this and the other.
Yeah.
What would you say to them when it turns out that he's perhaps the most secular of all kings?
Yeah.
By the end of his reign.
I'm always a little loath to use the word secular because it didn't exist in the time. We're talking about the 16th century, but a man who understood the huge diversity in his country. This is what he was. And he wanted to have a place of safety for all people, no matter their religious background, whatever background they had. And that for the 16th century was absolutely mind-blowingly unique. So the Christians who came to his court, the Jesuit missionaries, were amazed because back home they were Protestant and Catholics were fighting each other. And here they were saying, he has told us to build churches and that we are allowed to build churches and convert people if we so wish. The Shias were allowed to have their religions, whereas in other Muslim empires, if they were Sunnis and they were only Sunnis, not allowing Shias, wiped out. So this was extraordinary for the 16th century, a man who understood the diversity of his country and who encouraged this, the safety for everyone. So these are absolutely groundbreaking things which we should be celebrating, I think, and understanding how he came about to be the this human being, right? Instead of saying, oh, no, this is, not true, or this is what was happening.
This goes back to
I
the
don't
Salman
understand.
Rushdie story and everything else.
Yeah.
Without reading the book, you want to kill the guy. I mean,
That's right,
or the blasphemers against
That's,
Shivaji who don't understand
that's
what a nice story was told about
yeah.
him as a human being
Yeah.
rather than as a myth, and which actually for me glorifies the person even better.
That's right. So, I'm not interested in presenting just one part of the story. Yes, there was violence. We're talking about the 16th century. It was a violent time. There were battles, people were massacred. So I am presenting that as well. So there is no whitewashing of any sort, I think, happening. I am trying to understand the various factors, the various dynamics that were at play, which enabled a man like this to forge this empire.
Did he blatantly get rid of Bairam Khan in the end? I mean, was that
Bairam Khan, he sent away to Mecca. He sent him, that was the punishment of the 16th century, is that if you have displeased me in some way, in some terrible way, you will go to Mecca.
But despite the relationship they had initially when he was a teenager, the second battle, Panipat, all that,
not only that,
he turns his back on him.
He does, in the sense that he says that now you have overstepped the mark, which he had. He had made many judgment calls on his own. He was starting to put his own people in there. He was taking, he was not giving Akbar his due. Akbar was not growing up. So yes, it was time for Bairam Khan to leave, and he does tell him to go to Mecca.
It's just a question of Akbar trying to assert himself, or was it a question of Akbar deciding that he just didn't want anybody around to tell him what to do?
It was a little bit of both. It was definitely more of him asserting himself. And it was also the harem, we forget this, but the harem were working on block at this time.
Female politics?
Yes, female politics, very, very much present, and they had decided that Bairam Khan was overstepping the limits. He was taking all the power into his own hands. And now that Akbar was 18, 20 years old, it was time for him to step up. So his mother, Hamida Banu, led this coup by the harem, which we are often not told about. And they come to Delhi, and bring Akbar to Delhi from Agra, and they say, listen, you have to get rid of Bairam Khan. And he does.
But he doesn't kill him.
No, he doesn't kill him. He, unfortunately, in a completely, coincidental manner, he is killed by the child of a man who was killed in a previous battle. It was a personal vendetta. So Bairam Khan is killed before he leaves the shores of Hindustan.
You don't believe that Akbar is
silently sent?
The intrigue continues. We'll never know. Really,
he was a fairly sentimental man. I found that to my own surprise. He used to cry very easily. He used to feel sentimental about people he loved.
Even though he didn't read apparently that well, but lover of poetry and
loved
art forms.
Poetry and art, and a lot of my book
and discourse. The fact that he loved discourse is just beautiful. A king would listen to debates,
to different religions, to men from different backgrounds. Yes.
Cheer on the winner, regardless of which religion. He would be very happy with the guy whose point is.
That's right. Whoever scored the point, he would be terribly happy with them, and have a very good regard of the person who could hold their own.
It's a little disappointing then that we live in a country and in a world where people just put labels on everybody and that's it.
I think so, Cyrus. In that century and actually throughout Indian history, we have been so much more than our religion, so much more, always. Our identity is so complex. For example, you and I, now we have never spoken before today, but we have a lot in common as being residents of very big cities in India, educated writers. I know you've written as well. That brings a lot of convergence in our views, despite maybe it's got nothing to do with religion. On the other hand, we have points of divergence. You are a man negotiating an Indian space. I'm a woman negotiating it. So that brings a lot of divergence. But none of these things, convergent or divergent, has to do with our religions or lack of it. None of it. It has to do with, your profession, your community, your culture, your food, the music you listen to. All sorts of things have always contributed to Indian identity. And religion has always been only a part of that.
True. And anyway, I just think we should all be big fans of discourse. That's what democratic thought should be all about.
Agreed.
Instead of locking down left, right, and center, people should listen.
Yep.
Both sides of everything should be heard. But whatever. Can't complain too much. Still, I'm alive for what it's worth. We have to take a quick break.
Okay.
In that break, I've got to do an ad. So, Ira, you've got 2 minutes to relax, and then Silvery will join us. And then it's the AMA. So, all kinds of questions will flow.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, here we go with our cred ad, which I will take about 10 minutes to find, but I found it now. So, folks, this has to be done. Bills have to be paid. Literally, this IPL season, just pay your credit card bills on the Cred app and you could win some epic prizes. This is true. It's the Cred Daily Jackpot, a daily mystery reward, which is unveiled on the app every 13th over of the first innings of the match. Now, the prizes include a Samsung Frame TV with the TV inside as well, not just the frame, or a pair of Sennheiser wireless earphones, That's fabulous. Or 5 years worth of Gillette shave care. That's right, 5 years. So my wife has no excuse for not trimming the beard. No, I'm just kidding. After all we've said about women, and I mean, almost a feminist myself, and then to betray them in the last step. But I'll say this, Ira. I also suggest download Cred to understand more about the ad. I'll just say this. I really think we need more alpha women out there. More, even in politics. I won't take names. I just feel if you look at Angela Merkel, I'll take names outside India. It's safer.
Yes.
Or you
Yes.
look at all the examples.
Yes.
The New
Jacinda
Zealand
Ardern. Yeah.
Jacinta, and there are more the Taiwanese PM, and there are more than that. You can see maybe it's the mothering, nurturing
Yeah.
element. Maybe Angela Merkel because she's from East Germany, more
Yeah.
sensitive to pain and famine and suffering.
Yeah.
But you can see the difference in the humanitarian quality of those politicians
Agreed.
and the inclusive attitude
Yes.
to life
Yes.
towards as against the men. So I'm just thinking the whole political world should be run by women for a period of time. I just feel the empathy level is
Yes.
much higher, and the
Agreed.
sensitivity is much higher,
Yeah.
and the understanding of what human suffering is,
Yes.
which I think males don't seem to ever get it.
Well, at least they can't
except
do
for
a worse
piles. We
job
get a lot
than
of
what we.
piles. Yeah.
They can't do a worse job than what is happening in the world today, right? So
No,
at least give them that.
under pressure, these guys have proven to be far better politicians than the men.
Yes.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
The top five, we went through that ranking that day of 5 countries doing well and this and
Yes.
that and
Yeah.
all that. And these they're all run by women.
By women, yes. No,
Count for something.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I am not going to disagree with you on that.
Yeah, but even here, I won't take names again, but they're ferocious politicians. Sometimes you don't agree with what they're doing, but they've all
Yes.
done a little bit more than the men.
Yeah.
We go back to Mayawati, you can abuse her as much as you want. You're very
Yeah.
close to her in terms of geography. But, Mayawati came from nowhere, did what she
Yes.
had to do, and possibly has done far more in UP than
Yes.
subsequent governments.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. Let's call in Silvery. Silvery, young man.
Hello, hi, good morning.
At least
Hi.
comb
Hi,
your
Ram.
hair.
Hi.
I did. I don't know what's
You
wrong.
fell asleep because of the history lecture.
No, not at all. All right.
Okay.
Let's get to the emails.
Please. Go ahead.
Sure. The first one comes in from Janel Bain. This is not related to anything that we were talking about. He says, "What are your craziest Bombay traffic experiences?"
Gurgaon has its own. Before I go to Bombay, Gurgaon in 2010-11, I remember doing an ESPN show for a month there. And if you had that toll naka at the wrong time, oh my God!
Yes.
And people would plan the entire day around that.
Yeah.
And just that U-turn, I remember from the Trident Hotel where they put us up. I mean, it was 10 minutes away in the early morning.
Yeah.
Oh God. So I think these bumps are in every city. But in Mumbai, the biggest problem is that it never gets done.
Oh.
The work never gets done. It's almost like they've decided we'll do 100 years, like the 100 Years War. It'll just go on for 100 years. The cable laying, then nobody's clear about what happens, why the roads are dug up. But they're dug up. It just never gets done. And in my part of Mumbai, South Mumbai, it seems like they put all their money there. And they really, really just mess it up completely. Now my lane, Hanging Gardens, where the poor live, both the lanes have been dug up. So we have to all go through a one-way, and it's causing a traffic jam in a lockdown where there are just 10 cars on the road. Yeah. So, but talk about horrible stories. Do you have any, Ira?
For a long time in terms of traffic, we've always reassured ourselves that, well, Mumbai is much worse than Delhi, so we can't complain. But but because it's the geography of Delhi.
We're looking at a 2-kilometer standoff for 1 hour. You're looking at a 20-kilometer standoff for 1 hour. It's it's less pain.
Yeah. But it is getting from bad to worse, and I'm very glad for the metro at my doorstep, which I started using before the pandemic more and more. So that's been the big change for me in terms of traffic.
I used to fight a lot with taxi drivers actually when I was younger. When I first started driving my dad's Maruti back in the late in 1990 actually, and I remember I had this technique, especially if I had a girl in the car. That sounds terrible. If a lady friend was in the car with me, and I would like to use, I would like to use an accent when I'd say sorry to the guy if I cut him. So he'd come close to me. So just for male ego, I would say sorry, but I would say it with a French accent. So I go like Sarah. And then he'd say, "Kya bola?" Then "Maa ko kya bola?" And then the Ma Ben Gali would start. And then she would. I remember one girl telling me, "Why couldn't if you wanted to say sorry, you know it was your fault. Could you just say sorry? So why did you go Sora?" What kind of complex, screwed up mind that even your apology has.
Oh no.
Oops, I lost you.
Yeah, Cyrus got stuck. Hello.
Okay.
Oh, hello. Okay,
Lost in
Cyrus is
space.
stuck.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess he's stuck. Calm me out. Okay, a quick traffic thing that I wanted to share is I once almost conned a con man at a traffic stop. Basically,
Okay.
like, so one day, so I'm stuck in traffic at Juhu Circle, which is a junction in Mumbai,
Mm-hmm.
and a guy comes up to me, like quite well dressed, like seems like in his like mid 20s, quite well dressed, and through the window he's speaking like, "Sir, I want to talk to you."
Okay.
And so I lower my window a bit and I ask him, "What do you want?" And he like, "So I need money for my mother." He's like clearly making something up. He's like
Yeah.
making up a disease, making up an illness. My mother's in the hospital. I need money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I can't give you money." And whatever, this happens. Okay. 2 months later, the same guy at the same signal meets me again. Okay, so I roll down my window and and instead of before he can ask me, like, "Hey man, you took money from me last time. Where's my money?"
Not
And he
bad,
just
not
freaked out.
bad.
He just freaked out. He's like, oh no, okay. And he's right away.
Oh God.
That's
Oh
sad.
yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to the next question. Cyrus
Okay.
will join us back when he can.
Yeah.
Karan Sethi asks, "Who is your favorite character from the Mahabharata except Draupadi?"
That's an interesting question. My favorite character, except Draupadi, I quite like Kunti, because she is somebody who is, we don't think about it very often, but she is very powerless. She is somebody who becomes a widow very early. So she is a widow in this society which really glorifies your husband, especially if he's a king or an heir to the throne. This is
Also, her
everything that you
husband's
have.
name was Pandu, which is also kind of,
Okay.
you don't know that.
Yeah, okay. So, she's this widow and she has these small children to look after who were all born in the forest. So there's nothing to prove that they are actually Pandu's sons. And Pandu, as we know, was impotent. So he was not able to have children while he was living in Hastinapur. That's why he goes to the forest, supposedly for his health and to look after his health and to father children. So she comes back to Hastinapur as a widow, no longer married to the heir to Hastinapur, and somebody else has, taken the throne. She has these boys that nobody recognizes, nobody can vouch for them except for these sadhus who are accompanying her. And with such few tools in her hand, with such little armor to her, she manages to keep them safe and together, and binds them in this cause, which is to get back their throne. And she's given very little, credit for that. Her own sons, once they realize that she is also the mother of Karan, they repudiate her. So she has a very sorry fate and disappears from the Mahabharata later on, but yet she has accomplished so much with so little, really. So little was given to her and she was able to do so much.
Wow.
I apologize.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, Ira, there's some man who's done the wife. If it was a female, it wouldn't have happened.
Now you're thinking, right?
Saying all the right things.
That's right.
Sorry, the question was asked by Karan Sethi. He asked, "Who is your favorite character from the Mahabharata except Draupadi?" Ira was just talking about how Kunti is her favorite character. I have a question, Ira.
Mm-hmm.
How long, like, because your research about this seems very highly detailed and very strenuous, like how long does research for a book of yours take?
That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, it is a good question, and it takes me a long time. It takes me about, well, relatively speaking, like for a career historian, which I am not, they would spend their entire careers, developing perhaps one great book or one point that they have made. So I am not a career historian in that sense. I'm a writer of history. So I would say 2 to 3 years. But that's all I do, that's all I do morning to night. I have no day job. This is what I do. So it takes me that sort of, thank God for the internet. I get a lot of my work on the internet and then I go to libraries. But it is an arduous job. And I think it's because of my 5 years training as a scientist, which I have understood the research process. I know peer reviewed, material. I know how to judge material. So you see, no effort is ever wasted is what I tell myself. Even though I do not have a scientific career, I have used my training as a scientist.
And then you have to be allowed a little poetic license. That's the romance of writing as well.
Yes.
I'm presuming that when you, like, as you said, you look at Kunti and you're looking at her from 5 dimensions,
yes,
of rather than a one-dimensional track.
Yes.
Which is easy. You're getting that anyway from reference A, B, and C.
Correct.
And you've got that. Then you're putting it together in your mind and thinking, but wait, this is a mother, this is a daughter, this is a woman who's trying to get the best for her kids or whatever.
That's right.
So I think and people should be allowed to make that liberty, because that's what makes the character interesting. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's, as you said, as we discussed. Please watch the podcast for more relevant discussion points.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just black and white then.
Correct.
One more thing.
I think that's the fun of the historian dramatist, which I would, because the pure historian is one thing, but
Yes.
there's in later years you can be more pure. But I think you have to take that poetic license, and we have
I
to take it
think
with
so.
that
Yeah.
leap of faith.
Yes, and of course, the Song of Draupadi is fiction because it's a myth. But even my history books, I do always try and craft a story, because I think we are all geared to be listening to stories by the fireside. Our ancestors were doing that thousands of years ago. So we really like a good story. And so whatever I have written, I try to write it in a way that the person wants to know what happens next, who gets killed, or what is the denouement of this story. So it's something that I bring to even my history writing, which a pure historian, obviously a career historian, would be the last of their,
I'm
the
sorry,
factor.
I'm chuckling because you said fireside. I'm thinking growing up in Mumbai, if someone put a fire down in this heat and said, "Come on, let's chat."
Sorry.
Bring out the guitar. Let's sing some cowboy songs. Ouch.
That's the colonization of my mind, because
No,
I've been the Anglophone reference.
it's fine. It's a lovely, what's the right word? A scenic sort of. What's wrong with that? I wish we had that more, in communities. Lockdown brought the building communities slightly together, but then again,
yes.
out of fear, people are going apart, which I for 20 years didn't see in my compounds and all that.
Right.
Growing up, we played cricket and football and
Right.
just pass the time. But and then for the 2 generations, that's not happened, and suddenly we did it again thanks to lockdown.
Right.
I don't want this lockdown to continue. Silvery, do something about it, no?
I'll
Alright,
go on
sorry,
to the next
one.
question.
Yeah.
Before that, though, so you said about 2-3 years per book. Are you always working on multiple books at the same time?
I do, in a sense, that a lot these 4 books of mine have sort of each one has led to the next one in a pretty organic manner. So actually, this Song of Draupadi is actually my first book. It just was lying in a drawer for all these years, but it is the first book I wrote. And in Heroines, I've written about Draupadi as well. In Heroines, I also wrote about Jahanara Begum. That brought me to Daughters of the Sun, and Daughters of the Sun brought me to Akbar. So in each book, I have put aside notes for a potential future book that might be of interest as well.
Jahanara is Aurangzeb's sister, Jahanara, or
yes, that's right. She's Shah Jahan's daughter.
right? Anyone would have been better.
Of course.
Back to Silvery.
Yeah. Next one, again, a great question coming in from Karan Sethi again. He says, as someone who is knowledgeable about the Mughal period, what is a general misconception about that period and what is something that isn't commonly known about that period?
Well, it is the one big misconception that I tried to clear with Daughters of the Sun, is that Mughal women were cloistered within this space, within the harem, and they were absolutely, they had no power, they were illiterate, they had no money, they made no independent decisions, and they only lived to serve the emperor, mostly sexually. This was the idea that the European writers had fostered for a long time, and which somehow even seeped into our current consciousness. So this idea of the Mughal woman as powerless, essentially without a mind of her own, was something that I found was completely wrong, and which surprised even me a great deal to understand the extent of their power, their wealth, which they controlled independently, and their ambition. Many of them tried to do great things.
You think the story about Humayun asking God to take his life and preserving his sons and all that, you think there's anything to that? Or?
Babur?
Sorry,
yes,
Babur, yeah.
I think it's entirely possible, and we're talking about the mid-16th century, a great belief in the occult, a great belief in astrology, in the way in which you can parlay with the, extraordinary. These men all did this. They had a very strong sense of the way in which they were influenced by the planets, the way in which perhaps they could prevent that by knowing their knowledge of the planets. So entirely possible that something like that happened. It's been written about. It's not just, a lot of the other stuff is myth, it's oral history. This was written about, that he says, I am willing to give up my life in exchange for that of Humayun's.
And do you think before the Battle of Panipat, the whole story of giving up alcohol and breaking the goblet and this and that would be more like a publicity stunt? For someone who loved
yes,
pleasure and...
Exactly. It is something that would have been done to unite his men, who are all having second thoughts about the need to conquer this hot and dusty place called Hindustan, and let's go back to Kabul with its sweet melons. It is it is a grand gesture to bring these men together, to say, this is what I am willing to do. This is how much faith I have in my ability to lead you. So yes, they were great masters masters of, diplomacy and these great gestures. Psychology of leaders of men, of, these. So absolutely, yes.
Wow, it's fascinating. Silvery, next one.
Yeah, next one comes from Kashin Shetty. Hi, Kashin. He says,
regular.
Yeah, regular.
Celebrity.
Says, yes, absolutely. Yeah, also kind of celebrity. He says, hello, Ira ma'am. Is there a particular mythological / historical tale that you would like to be retold from a female point of view? For example, Ramayana from Surpanakha's POV.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely would. All these, a lot of these characters, even in the Mahabharata, who are called, tribals, and who are criticized and violated in many ways, like, Hidimba and her brother, her brother was killed, and Bhim then, fosters a son on her, Ghatotkacha. So they are talked in very derogatory manner. They are, demeaned in many ways. These are probably tribal peoples. If we think about this as an ancient story happening somewhere in Hindustan, these so-called demons and ogres and ogresses were probably tribal people who spoke a different language. So I would very much like, especially the women who have been cast in this category, which I have done with Hidimbi to a little bit small extent. I would love to see from the woman's point of view, Surpanakha, definitely. What drove her to this? Who was she really? What were the dynamics in her life?
Yep. Okay, and moving on to Janil Bain's question. Janil Bain asks, are there any mentions of mental health problems faced back then, like in the historical period of, say, Akbar or someone?
Yes, it comes up actually quite often. Akbar himself, he says, suffered from melancholy, and the Jesuit priest, believed that he had epilepsy, that he had fainting fits, which is often associated with depression. So absolutely, I have thought about this. There are references to this, that Akbar did have melancholy and depression from time to time. And how did he react to that? He reacted to that with this excess of energy, of going out there. And what is often advised for people in depression today, along with medication, you will try and do something creative and outlet for your energies, to bring you back to life in a sense. And I think in a way, that is how Akbar coped with his own melancholy. But in a particular incident, for example, I think it was in 1577, at his moment of, almost mystical reawakening, he had such an episode that his mother had to come to him and say, it is not done for kings to give up their land and give up kingship. You must come back to the day-to-day running of your empire. So yes, he did face these moments of doubt, of melancholy, of gloom, and it is something that we can understand today.
But it's amazing if it's true that the alpha male side of his personality, the despotic side, and then there's a spiritual journey and a spiritual humanitarian side, which is waking up in the same. I mean, that's just fabulous.
It is. It is a very, very complicated and textured person. And I think that is the fascination for me, is understanding how did that come about? Who were the people because there are many, many people around him, instrumental in this journey. What did each one of them bring? How did they shape this man? How did he shape himself, with the animals of India? He used animals a lot, which I find extremely interesting, Yeah, he loved animals. How did that come about? How did the miniaturists record all these animals in their paintings? So it's a fabulous life, full of all sorts of episodes, and it's worth remembering.
That's my favorite part about him, Silvery. Lover of animals, but killer of men. I want to be that person. I want to be the person who cries when the dove is shot, but doesn't shed a tear when 20 men are slaughtered.
True.
I mean, there's a, I don't know what it is. It's a black irony or what, but some of the other, it doesn't hurt me when I think about it. But I'm sick. Yeah. Can we squeeze one more in, Silvery?
Yeah, sure. This one comes in from Prarabdh. It's kind of similar to what the other people have already asked. He says, who according to you is the most interesting but lesser known woman in Indian history?
Ooh,
she's covered that there are many options.
Yeah, many options, yes.
Many options.
But maybe someone you haven't already talked about.
Okay, so something I haven't talked about, even though she is very well known. I feel that she is known wrongly, is Rani Lakshmibai. She is one of our great pan-Indian heroines, and yet we know her for having died in battle. We know Khoob Ladi Mardani. So we know this one aspect of her, which is actually a very male sort of version of what heroism is. Whereas when I looked at her life, I found that she was so much more complicated. She was an ambassador. She wrote letters to the British. She tried very hard to rule her land.
As well, yeah.
Jhansi. Yeah, she wanted to live. She did not not want to die. She was pushed to fight the British. She would not have fought them, I think, if she had been given Jhansi to rule. But we have interpreted her in this very unidimensional, one sort of dimensional way, which is that she died in battle. Therefore, no aspersions could be cast upon her after that. Whereas Hazrat Mahal, who fought the same battle for independence but carried on to live, she's not given the same glory. So it's fine. You die in battle. Nobody can say anything bad about you anymore. Perfect. You are the perfect Brahmin widow figure to venerate. But there was a great deal more to Rani Lakshmibai. She's a fascinating
character. Death makes angels of us all.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Very poetic today.
Yeah. I'm quoting Jim Morrison, actually, who's quoting somebody else. But I'm just saying, that's true, isn't it? I mean, of all the iconic people in our lives, not in art forms as well, not just in history, that touch, they pay that ultimate price, and for that they're given glory forever.
They're given glory,
but I understand your point, which is like, maybe we spend too much time thinking of her as a male hero who dies in battle for a country which is not even actually there.
Not even there at all. And her enemies are not the British. They are her immediate neighbor, the Queen of Orcha, who was always wanting her kingdom. So things are very different, at that time. And it's interesting to see things in their own context.
Dilbari, who's your favorite female historian figure in history?
Someone whose point of view
your sexism
is no. Wait.
If I ask you male, scream like Harshavardhan, Chandragupta, Akbar, whatever. If I ask you female, where?
I want to hear the story of the POV of Narendra Modi's wife. What's happening, man?
Publish your books in peace. Let this podcast travel. You go to Poland and do your jokes. Now, don't do it here. We have to live. There's also the logistical, practical, exactly what we were talking about with Rani Lakshmibai, who was trying to be practical and was forced into a...
Okay, sorry. We have one more request from the comments before we end. Sharda Duttar, who is a regular listener of ours, has said, "Hey Cyrus, please wish me a happy birthday. It'll make my day."
Oh.
Sharda, happy birthday. Sharda is normally a female name, so...
Sharda is a female name, yes. Sharda.
But in India, we never know anymore. Ira, we started the whole conversation and come up full
about
circle
names.
Now. Yes. It's so nice that you haven't taken it badly. I, for example, can't stand people telling me Cyrus the virus. Because everyone thinks it's their creative moment, not realizing it's the 8 millionth person who's come up with the same obvious rhyme.
Right.
Really. And the thing is really funny for a minute, and now with the pandemic, I've got it a lot more. So they think they've hit that epitome of black humor, where you perfectly straddle the irony meets pain and whatever. And I'm like, all you're doing is irritating me. I prefer the COVID to you.
Dear.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been lovely. Thank you so much, Ira.
Thank you so much.
Hope you write many, many more books, and in better times we get to see you in the flesh.
Thank you, Cyrus. Yes.
And I'll be there to defend the tribe.
I'm so glad to hear that.
All right. Bye, guys.